Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Wanti-Wari-Andani. I want to explain about listen and compassion from the frontline by Arwa Damon. The reality is that I know war very, very well. I have witnessed time and time again the way that it can destroy a person's soul, the way that an individual ends up utterly shredded by the lack of comprehension when it comes to how to process their emotions, how to cope with the physical description of everything that they knew the burial, and how close at their mental psyche every single step of the way, and in worst cases even steals away any shred of dignity that may remain. I just got back from Raqqa city that had just been liberated by the Syria Democratic Forces, that is the forces that being backed by the US coalition, and it was liberated from ISIS. And despite all of the difference was honest that I have been to, there was something that was especially cheering about Raqqa. Every other place that I have been to, mind destruction and devastation, you will always find little bits of color, whether it was a child, sure, or a toad, or a scrap of the notebook. There would be kind of the lies that used to excite there of the happiness that once excited within these walls, and in Raqqa there was nothing. It was great, and it was impossible to imagine how anyone could have quite possibility survived. And then I met a family who did at one of the request camps, and Naza, she was a mother, and she had 7 children, and she was telling us about how she had to send out her 9-year-old daughter while they were under siege to go and get spoilers for them. Her 9-year-old daughter would go out and siphoned with a hose fuel from pocket out cars so that she could make break for the rest of them, and they had underground in the darkness and the final days of the bitter of, because they had tried to fly time and time again. They would try to run away, and at every single occasion, the described how ISIS would shoot at them, and they would be forced back or even stop them and hold a gun to their ears. If the little 5-year-old would easily mimic the way the ISIS would say, "Stay back, we're gonna shoot you." And so the 9-year-old went out, and one day the 9-year-old managed to find a little piece of meat. She began it off. It's a splatter, and it was so small it would fit in the palm of your hand. And this way to find a family of 9, and the other children were so excited. You would think that they had just seen the most marvelous gift they call possibility in match. That's how private they were in those moments. in those final moments, and the reason why Naza had to send out her 9 years old was because she could not send out her 17 years old son. Isis was treacherously conservative mind. She could send out her 15 years old daughter because Isis was trying to get as many brides as possible, and they had in fact already come after her daughter, but she had somehow found the courage to grab a knife from the kitchen and chase this fighter out of her house. But the 15 years old had to stay hidden, and so she sent out her 9 years old. Now of course her entire family worked incredibly hard to find survive, but now they were living in a wreckage camp, and they literally had nothing. Naja actually constantly messaged me a few days ago, and she said, "You know, Odawa, it's been about a week since you have been here. You know, people been saying they're reporting about Raqqa. We know that there been a lot of journalists. You know what's going on. Is anyone gonna help us? What do we do? Does not the world care about what's happening?" I could not respond to those questions, because if I were to try to say something reassuring, that would probably be a lie, and I could not tell her the truth that most people turn away when they see stories from Syria, that there is a party when it comes to a lot of the workers that are quietly out there, and that politicians and global leaders and the people that could actually impact her life probably don't really understand it, and maybe even don't care. So I had to say nothing, and that not the first time we as journalists reside with these kinds of questions from this kind of individual that have already been talked more and than we can ever possibly imagine. And so, most mornings, most days, in fact, I do think that maybe the world is better off if our planet was just hit by an asteroid, because for us as journalists we really do feel, especially today, that a lot of it is reporting that we're doing conspiracy when it comes to human stories to the people that are suffering because of the decision over which they have no control of that is happening in a dark void, in a dark abyss. But then I remember that story of little boy who taught me one of the most valuable lessons I have ever learned throughout my career. This little boy's name was Yusuf. It was Iraq. It was 2007, and back then Iraq too was no longer really in the headlines. It was no longer really in the spotlight. People were turning away when they heard story about Iraq. Yusuf came to our office, our CNN Hogred brought, and he had been part a now massacre and had doused him in gasoline and set him on fire. He was just 5 years old. By the time he got into our office, his face had hardened into this mask of a scar tissue. He could not open his mouth and he sat in our faded brown eating rice, but he had to take one grain at a time and just shove it between his lips. He was so angry, but he didn't know how to process this emotion. He was just 5 years old, and so all you really understand how to treatment this child was look in his eyes, and he was lashing out at his sister, and his parents didn't know what to do, and only word to warn the boy was say, "Look, we can try to tell you her story, but we don't know what's gonna happen." We told Yusuf's story and the response was amazing. I came from all over the world. People want to help it. Transgender, ethnicity, nationality, religion, all sorts of boundaries people came together to help this little boy in the organization in Los Angeles and up agreed to take on the case. CNN viewers donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to help this family out. My best moment of my career was the moment when I would pick up the phone and tell his parents, "Your little boy is gonna get help," and travel with them to Los Angeles. And I remember seeing Yusuf at the beach, and he was saying the orange for the first time, and he ran toward it screaming and laughing and looked over at his parents, and they were crying because it was the first time they heard their son walking years. What that story taught me was that the kindness and compassion of strangers exist, and we may not always see it every day, but just the power of caring and then of doing something about it, even if small. Donating to one little boy has such a massive sound impact. Yusuf today not only wants to be a doctor to help others in a way that he was being helped, he doesn't remember that it take any more. 10 years on, this 15 years old boy's life, his first memories of life are not defined of violence. They are defined by the kindness and compassion that he saw afterwards. And doesn't need to be lingering change that can impact a person's life. How we relate to one another, and sometimes the world of situation can have a lasting impact on our psyche. For myself personally, about a year ago today, I was in Missouri. I was embedded with the Iraq counter-terrorist forces with my cameraman, and we were going in as they were part of their first pass to try to take Mosul from ISIS, and our unit, our convoy, ended up being ambushed and beside car bomb came and took out the back side of the convoy and forced the first when I had been his massive ball of flames, and we were trapped, and we ended up sinking shelter In the middle of all of this meet in civilian homes. And we were in one house and the front line was pretty much the wall of the house. The women and children were hiding in the back corner. The courtyard of the house were flanked with wounded soldiers and streaked with blood. And in the middle of all of this, the homeowner makes fried eggs for us and for the soldiers because despite it was we were their cause, and that was the only way that they could also hold on to their humanity and their dignity. But for me, that whole nightmare of an older that I was fortunate enough to have only last for 24 hours was not defined by the fear that I experienced. It was defined by the kindness that I saw. We know that we cannot stop the wars, but we can help to manage the consequence of it on an individual, if not directly alter them. Small action in words that we write to one another, especially people that have suffered violence and trauma, has a profound impact, whether it's a small moment that just lasts for a day or even less, or whether it's one that can impact them over and over again over the course of a lifetime. I remember about 2 years ago during the big flood of regards to Europa, I was in Hungary covering the frigate crisis, and that was the one day when the frigates who had been waiting at the brave train station decided that we were gonna walk this hour. Individuals who had not only seen the worst of the suffering in their own countries, the worst of the violence possible, imaginable, had just crossed the Mediterranean, risking their life, risking their children's, and then could literally cry their children for weeks and suffered every single humiliation you could possibly imagine along every step of the route. And as they walked and we were broadcasting live as per others networks, about 2 hours into this walk, all of the sudden people began showing up with strollers. The refugees that were around us at that moment were so overwhelmed at that little small gesture that they said that they would never forget it. And I believe them when they say that. I believe that that is going to be one of the key points of story that they then tell their children. What I know now is that governments will continue to fail. They will fail. But we do not need to fail each other. There are things that we can do on a small scale every single day. We choose how we write to one another. We cannot turn away from a few stories because it might be disturbing. We can slowly go out and learn more about the root cause of what is happening and understand a bit more about what actually needs to be done to prevent. We can educate our children about what's happening in the world around them. Teach them not to be afraid of someone because they may perceive them. or misperception. As being different, we can teach our children, we can teach ourselves and oblige ourselves to God and speak to somebody who might be the new child or the new family in town. There are little things we can do every single day that have an immense and enormous power. Okay, thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.